Hello, I'm James Cridland, the radio futurologist, and every week, I say every week, it's been more than a month since I last did one of these, but every week, theoretically, I write a weekly newsletter about radio and that sort of thing, and this podcast is where I read everything out, and I don't bother editing anything, because, I'm just trying to get better at reading. That's all it basically is. So there we are. It's December the 18th, and this is all about radio marketing. Well, at least it starts off that way. And I know it's been a month since my last weekly newsletter, but there we are. It's the day job getting in the way, so sorry about that. This is some week before Christmas listening for you. Clearly, you're just winding down for the holidays. You're not doing 3 times the amount of work, are you? So, yes, I'm excited that I'm going to be speaking again at Podcast Movement Evolutions in March. Radio Days Europe, also in March in Prague. The NAB show in April in Las Vegas, if they finally confirm that one. The New Zealand Podcasting Summit, which is in May in Auckland. And Radio Days North America, which is in June in Toronto. And I'm not entirely convinced that the event industry is fully back on track yet, but it does look as if it's having a pretty good go on it. So that's good news. And also, I'm no longer very active on Twitter. I used to be very active there. No longer really very active on there at all. Elon Musk is a fool, clearly. But if you're in the Fediverse, like if you're in Mastodon, for example, then you will find me. I am James Cridland at podcastindex.social, if you just search for that. James Cridland at podcastindex.social. On your own Mastodon, then you should hopefully find me, and you can follow me there, and that'd be lovely. Now, as a former ad writer, I think there's a great session for a radio conference about radio station marketing. I think the session would be brilliant. We would show some good and bad examples of radio station marketing. We would have ad creatives that don't work for radio, rating them to see if they're any good or not. Is it clear? Does it work? Are there things that we can learn to promote radio better? And an example of what I think is a really, really good one is Virgin Radio's new TV ad. You'll find it linked in the show notes and in my newsletter at james.crid.land, which succinctly and repeatedly hammers home the 3 points. Virgin Radio is the one with Chris Evans. Virgin Radio is the one with Graham Norton. And by inference, Virgin Radio is the one with the stars. It's very good. And in fact, let me play you it. Edit. And before I do, just let me explain what's going on. These are 2 gentlemen who are recognisable from TV and everything else, and they are being accosted by normal members of the public in the street. Aren't you?
Hey! Hey, you!
On Virgin Radio. Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Hey, aren't you?
On Virgin Radio? Yes, I am.
Oh.
Hey! Aren't you?
On Virgin Radio, yeah, that's right. Hey, aren't you? On Virgin Radio, yes, I am. So see, that's why I'm here.
There we are, and there's an end credit which shows you all of the ways that you can tune in. Very good. I think that is pretty good, personally. My favourite example of an awful one I can't actually play on this podcast because it's just R. Kelly's I Wish I Could Fly with a dog with ears. You'll find that linked anyway, so there we go. Now, Pod News covered Apple's top podcasts with details of how they're worked out, not just total downloads, of course. We link to the list from the UK in my show notes and the newsletter at james.crid.land. The BBC has just 3 podcasts in the top 20. Desert Island Discs is the only top 10 appearance. Not quite the young, exciting BBC it would like you to think it is. By comparison, Global, though, only has 1. Bauer doesn't have any at all. I can't even think of a big podcast that Bauer produces. Maybe there is one. Who knows? Acast have 10. And in Australia, for interest, the ABC has 3, Murdoch's News Corp has 3, and Listener has just 2. Didn't count the number of podcasts from Acast in Australia, so let me very quickly do that. 1. 1. There you go. 1. There you go. That's the answer to that one. Of interest, though, the BBC is the number 26 biggest podcast publisher in the US. That's survey data from Edison Research over the last 12 months, which I found fascinating. The BBC has also added rewind functionality to its Alexa radio listening skill, which is quite nice. Won't be on Google, though. And the UK commercial radio body Radio Centre took the BBC and Ofcom to court in November for launching, they would claim, a new radio station without the proper public interest test. The new radio station, or not a radio station, as the BBC would have it, is called BBC Radio 1 Dance. It's only available online within BBC Sounds, and that, the BBC says, doesn't make it relevant for a public interest test. KISS or Capital Dance, both of whom have a significant online audience, would probably beg to differ. Anyway, I can't see any details of when the ruling is expected, or in fact if it has already been made. I assume it hasn't because I can't find any information about that, but it may just be me being rubbish, and in which case apologies. I linked to a look at the BBC's Inspiring Web Principles 15 years later. This was a piece of work from Tom Loosemore. I'm not entirely convinced that all of senior management bought into them, I have to say, but nevertheless. And this blog post takes a look at whether or not they're actually achieving them 15 years later. One of the things that it says is, I see lots of digital products like BBC Sounds which seem to go against the grain of user needs and instead focus on what the BBC wants. Ouch. As one example, somebody called Garvey Scott Lodge complained to the BBC that its withholding of some podcasts for 28 days after transmission for places other than BBC Sounds could in some cases be, quote, detrimental to public health. The BBC is also to remove shoutcast streams from their radio stations. You'll no longer be able to listen that way. Their advice is to use BBC Sounds. Oh, okay. I also linked to a website containing a database of radio streams. I should tell you what it is because this is a podcast and that would be helpful. It's radio-browser.info, radio-browser.info. There's a full free API for your use as well if you want it. It contains the BBC for now, at least. And the BBC's Tim Davie, who's the Director General, of course. He did a pretty good speech at a TV event asking for UK regulators to be faster and more proactive with their regulation. Wholeheartedly agree with that. And I would also say that that's something for Canadian regulators to look at, not just the UK's. Tim Davie also suggests that Radio Player was one of the highlights of the BBC's collaborative work, and I'm proud to have been involved in the early days in that. In November was the World DAB Summit, and this year the whole event was filmed, and you'll find that available over on YouTube. It's worth a watch, and worthwhile remembering that Norway turned off FM 5 years ago, and Switzerland will be doing the same in 2024. There's a session all about that, worth a read. Also on YouTube, a fascinating listen to some numbers stations as well, which is always fine. I linked to a good piece in the UK's Daily Telegraph about Boom Radio with some excellent interviewees. Yes, I was interviewed for that. Phil Riley also spoke at World DAB about Boom Radio too. Simulcasting the telly on the radio. Quite a few people are doing this now, taking a TV channel and just sticking it out on the radio. Well, that's fine, but occasionally it can get you into hot water. And as one example, if you're covering elections in the UK, then you have to mention all parties and candidates standing in a election, at least initially. And GB News did that on the telly, but they didn't do that on the radio. Or rather, they put a caption up saying who all of the candidates were, but didn't actually read them out for the radio, which was a bit of a mistake, so whoops. I found a radio streaming service called Mid-Tempo Radio online. It's run by somebody called Chris, and he's playing what he calls an eclectic library, but with AI running the segues, which is very clever. The segues all sound pretty good to me. They get the timing right, as well as getting the volume right. I'm quite a fan of segues which aren't too tight, which some of these aren't, so that was a good thing. In fact, quite often I don't notice the segues at all because I've never heard half of the songs before. But I do wonder what work is being done in that area and why online music services are still so bad at doing segues. Spotify basically doesn't do them, nor does YouTube Music. I wonder why. LBC journalist Charlotte Lynch was arrested for doing her job. She was covering a protest. She was arrested by the Hertfordshire police. It was nice to see that the story was repeatedly covered by the BBC, who've previously been a bit sniffy to even acknowledge the existence of commercial radio journalists, so hurrah for you. If you pretend that you've used a thing that you haven't used for an ad, then certainly in America, the FTC is cracking down. iHeart got fined because some of their presenters were going on the air and saying how good the latest Google Pixel phone is without actually having one, which is a bit of a mistake. Talking about the US, Edison Research continues to produce some fantastic numbers. In-car in the US, radio is king, even for younger people, they say. And over elsewhere, in another posting, they've got a very good graph for the US showing AM/FM over-the-air listening versus streaming, which I find fascinating. Really fascinating how far behind the US is to other countries. So the latest figures from Edison Research, about 12% of listening to AM/FM radio stations is online. For the UK, that figure is 23.6%, so twice as much, basically. And I'd like to quote the CRA's figures in Australia, but they don't publish them. But I would lay a bet that they're somewhere in the middle, though. Yes, I may be labouring under an NDA. Who knows? But anyway, enjoy AM radio in your car while you still have it. The New York Times has woken up to AM's removal by many US auto manufacturers who can't get the wave band working well with their electric motors. The radio industry is quoted in the article saying, but what happens in an emergency? I'll tell you what happens in an emergency. Nothing, because all of your radio stations in the US, or most of them on AM, are just boring rebroadcasts of some satellite-delivered audio from hundreds of miles away, and so therefore, even in an emergency, nothing will actually happen. But you knew that anyway. But some people on social media have ended up saying that. And a Lazy Buggles headline corner. One article... let's find out who that article is. He says, pressing the button, no edit. Pressing the button. This is in something called Talkhouse, never heard of it. But anyway, it starts off by saying AI killed the radio star, and it's an article about bot-generated art. Always nice to read that something else has killed the radio star. A piece about AI image generators elsewhere. This is in techinasia.com. And it's called Will AI Image Generators Kill the Artist? And then says, I was young when I first listened to Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles. I thought it was a fun and catchy song, but I had no idea what it was all about. Yes, it was all about nothing that actually happened, because of course videos most certainly not killed the radio star. And another drive-by swipe in Boing Boing, which normally knows a little bit better than this, and starts just like Video killed the radio star, the internet killed the record label, and thank God for that. I do wonder who is basically going after these people and saying, you do realise that what you've just said is not entirely correct. Yes. Anyway, thank you to Richard Hilton, to James Masterton, and to Brun Audio Consulting for your ongoing support and, frankly, patience by supporting this newsletter. I'm very grateful to you. If you'd like to support my work in any way, you can buy me a coffee. buymeacoffee.com/James Cridland. You can become a member to give regularly, or just give a one-off coffee or 5. That would be a lovely thing. And my professional website, I use the word professional. Yes. Anyway, it's got more details about who I am, what I do, and whether I can help you further. You'll find that at james.crid.land. No, you won't. That's this newsletter. You'll find that at james.cridland.net. And until next time, keep listening.